Hey, it's Lenny Liebman of Information Week, and I'm here at Interop ITX in Las Vegas with Paul Andersen, who's VP of Sales North America for Array Networks. Paul, it's good to see you.
Thank you, Lenny. Good to be here.
Let's start off talking about network virtualization, especially as it relates to sort of cloud providers and MSPs, et cetera.
Sure. So, we've seen this move towards virtualization. It's the primary way that the cloud provider and even the MSP now are doing things, right? Very easy as compared to the traditional dedicated networking or security appliance. It's very easy to scale out, scale up. You know, a customer grows, you can scale with them. You get new customers, you can easily add them. You get some customer churn. You can replace one service with another very easily. The other aspect of it is as compared to the dedicated networking appliance, which is a very high cost item, right? The virtual approach allows them to, in a much better way, to map their revenues to the customer demand, or their cost to the customer demand, right? The customer wants a particular service for a particular amount of time, a month, 2 months, 3 months. You can go ahead and pay a networking or security vendor on a subscription basis for some of those services. So you get a customer, you buy that service and you resell it, and it's much more easier to control your costs and to maintain those margins. So all those reasons kind of combine, and this is the direction that a lot of those cloud providers and those MSPs are heading.
Yeah, and that's a good point you have, which is I've got to always be able to map my cost of providing service with what I'm actually billing, so I can have some kind of visibility into what my margins are. But there is a sort of downside with virtualization, which is that if I'm using generic hardware, I may face issues as I'm trying to scale, as my workloads get more intensive, as my customers become more demanding.
Yeah, that's right, and I like to answer this question with a bit of an anecdote, and it kind of comes from some of the real-world observations that we've, in talking to our current customers and also talking to new prospective customers, right? We have customers that 4 or 5 years ago, they would generally buy let's call it a dedicated load balancing appliance or a dedicated application delivery controller appliance, and they're coming to us, in this last year, and we're seeing many of them say, I want to go more of this virtual. I want instead of the traditional physical load balancer, I want a virtual load balancer. And we take a look at it, and what we're seeing is that this is kind of breaking one of two ways. We'll either look at it and we'll say, how many users do you have? How many SSL transactions per second do you have? How much throughput do you need? How complex is the configuration? A couple different things that we look at. And for some customers, we go, you know what, the virtual, this is the right solution for you, actually. And if I'm being totally honest, maybe the big iron appliance, maybe that was a bit overkill for a couple of customers, and we get them into a virtual appliance, and they kind of have the best of both worlds. They get the functionality they want, and it's also very versatile, very adaptable, and they're good. There's another kind of segment of the customers we start talking to, and we look at it, they've got tremendous throughput. They've got a tremendous number of SSL transactions per second. It's complicated, and we kind of go down the list, and what we see is if we're going to try to take the virtualization approach using general purpose servers, we start to see, okay, how many of those do we need? And the truth is that at some point you actually can't throw enough at it to kind of get where you need to go. There's a lot of complexity in trying to get a general purpose server to withstand the demands of networking. And so they look at all those factors and they go, we want it to go virtual. It may not be the time just yet.
Yeah.
So, and we can, all that stuff you're trying to do, we can get that done with, 2 physical appliances, and you're done and dusted, and you're back in business, and they go, well, let's just do that, right?
Yeah.
So what we're seeing there is there's that trade-off right now. The virtualization approach for networking and security services gives you adaptability, flexibility. And the dedicated hardware appliances gives you simplicity, scalability, performance, and horsepower. And depending on where you're at, you're going to go one direction or the other, right? And so that's what's happening now.
Yeah. So and I think it's interesting that you bring up a point that is, as you add boxes, you've got a variety of complexities that you add to it, which have to do with management, they have to do with licensing the software you're running on it and all that. So maybe you want to talk to me a little bit about how what Array Networks is doing so that maybe I don't have to constantly shift between, okay, here's where I want to be virtual and here's where I want a dedicated appliance.
Sure, so that's exactly right. So Array Networks, we make a product, we call it the Network Functions Platform. And it's a purpose-built platform. So it's purpose-built to run networking and security virtual appliances, right? So as opposed to trying to do virtualization on a general purpose server, we're saying, hey, come take a look at our product. We think this can make a lot more sense. The two things that we really focus in on to try to make our product a better approach is around both performance and complexity. And I think we've touched on that a little bit already. You mentioned complexity, I talked a little bit about performance. And I'll start with the performance, right? So our platform, in contrast to the server, we were actually built from the ground up, purpose-built for the purpose of running virtual networking and security functions, right? So that's, whether that's the components, the chipsets, the Intel, the NICs, whether that's the the advanced hardware acceleration for SSL, all those components are built into those things. They're picked for this particular purpose. And our secret sauce really comes in where we talk about our operating system, right? Because what it allows you to do is all those hardware resources, whether they be the CPUs, the virtual CPUs, the SSL, the hardware SSL resources, memory, interfaces, physical and virtual, we allow you to slice those. You can almost think of it as virtualizing the hardware too. So let's say that I load a virtual network function onto this platform, then I can carve off dedicated hardware resources, tie it to that particular instance, and by doing so, you're going to get hardware-like performance out of a virtual appliance.
So you give me kind of like the modularity of of commodity servers underneath, but I can allocate that as best befits what my needs are for these particular functions. And we were talking about one function in particular I thought was interesting, since you mentioned sort of SSL, kind of this challenge we have with encrypted malicious traffic on a network. You want to talk to me about that function in particular?
I will. I'll make one quick comment on the complexity, and then I'll move very quickly to the SSL solution, because I think it's a good one. The other thing, in addition to the performance, is there are a lot of things if you're trying to undertake NFV. I'll rattle off a few of them. SRIOV, DPDK, CPU pinning, NUMA boundary, drivers. The list goes on. These are the kinds of things that if you want to get into network functions virtualization, you kind of need to be an expert in some of those things, or you're going to run into trouble. The cool thing about our platform, in my opinion, is that we abstract that. We automate that. So you don't need to be an expert in that. You can simply pick a networking or security virtual function, pick an appropriately sized instance on our box, hit start, and you're off to the races, and you don't have to be an expert, right? So it allows you a very quick path to get into this agility of virtualization.
But as I gain expertise, you're going to give me the ability to exercise that expertise so I can fine-tune and configure and get really good at what it is I'm trying to do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We give people, like I say, we have instances that start off on these defaults of entry, small, medium, and large. And it should be kind of obvious from your SKU which one you pick, and you go ahead and start it, and you're going. But if you come back and say, this function is very SSL-centric, this function is very memory-centric, then as you become more familiar with the box, we allow you to go in there and tweak those knobs, right, and tune it.
Can we go back to the SSL, and can you just real quickly tell me about how you're solving that problem of inspecting encrypted traffic that may potentially be malicious and I got to keep an eye on?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the key solutions that we've seen that's being deployed on this platform is to address the challenge of so much of the traffic on the web these days is SSL encrypted, like 75%, 80%, right? And you got all these great security solutions for doing inspection, DDoS, WAF, IPS, IDS. You can't see the traffic, how do you do the inspection, right? So on our platform, what we do is we bookend the platform with ADCs that can do heavy-duty SSL offload and SSL decryption, and we do a bit of a man-in-the-middle type forward proxy solution. We decrypt it, we service chain it to whatever security services you load on the platform.
Take a look at it, send it on encrypted.
You got it.
That's beautiful.
Exactly
I like that a lot. Anything else you want to share, because we got to wrap up?
I'll say that if you're interested in some of the things that we've talked about today, I would say swing by our booth. I think we're kind of kitty corner here, but you should be able to find us. We're doing demos, we got a big monitor, and we're kind of walking people through this thing. And we also have a speaking slot in the Interop Theater here at 3:15, where we'll go more in depth in some of the stuff that we talked about here today.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. Thanks so much, Paul.
Thank you, Lenny. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. That's Lenny Liebman of Information Week at Interop ITX. If you found this time worthwhile, stay tuned. We got more interviews coming up.